A long-lost artifact from the sunken Empress of Ireland was recently discovered in the St. Lawrence River. It was photographed and sent to historian and author David Saint Pierre, and he knew what it was right away. He joins us now to talk about it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on.
So it turns out you've actually been studying this artifact for years. Can you just tell us what it was, first of all?
Yeah, absolutely. What has been found is the compass platform of the Empress of Ireland. This used to sit atop the bridge of the Empress, and this is where the main navigating decisions would be made on the bridge of the Empress of Ireland.
And so why have you been studying this? I mean, you've been studying the whole story for many, many years, but why have you been studying this particular artifact for all this time?
Yeah, well, it so happens that I have a few artifacts that have been recovered from the Empress of Ireland in the 1990s when it was still legal to recover artifacts. And one of them is the only piece of that compass platform that has been recovered. And nobody had known what the artifact that I have is, so I had been studying exactly that for a few years. And as soon as I saw the underwater footage, I knew right away what the object was.
Yeah, and you've spent most of the past 30 years researching this. How significant is this find in particular?
Well, this find is very interesting, I would say, on two levels. The first level is technical because this was a part of the Empress that was added before the first few voyages of the ship. So it's not part of the original plans. It's not part of the original design of the Empress. So not seeing it and not being able to study it as it is, we would not know exactly what it would look like and the size of it and the shape. So that's a more technical side. But on the historical side, this is where Captain Kendall, the night of the sinking, spotted the SS Storstad and spotted the fog bank coming in between the two ships just moments before the disaster. So this is pretty significant.
Right. And so what are the next steps? I mean, for this, first of all, for this specific artifact, what will happen to it now?
Well, for now, it sits about 2 kilometers away from the wreck itself, because actually the object is there because there was an attempt to recover it in the 1990s and it was dropped along the way. You have to know that this is very large. It's 8 foot by 8 foot made of solid teak, so it's really heavy. And so it sits 2 kilometers away from the wreck. And I think the plan would be to try and get a permit to recover the object eventually. But of course, this being a protected wreck and a historical site, like any archaeological find, if there's no permit given, it will stay there on the bottom of the river and it will be studied in situ right there.
And where does it stand? I mean, obviously, you've been looking into this for many, many years. Is there sort of an end goal, or where do we stand in terms of searching for artifacts after this disaster?
Yeah, well, since 1999, it's impossible to recover artifacts unless you have a permit, but it never happened since that time. But it's still possible to dive. So there are dives on the wreck, and it's still possible to study the wreck and study how it's evolving through time, because, of course, after almost 110 years now, the wreck is pretty damaged. But for the artifact itself, let's hope that it ends up in a museum in public display, if ever it is recovered. And because if not, it will stay for another 110 years on the bottom of the river.
Right. David Saint Pierre is a historian and author. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.